All right, welcome to another episode of the Kill Cliff podcast, hosted by your guys at Entreprenerds Comedy.
On today's show, we got Gary Quesenberry. Am I saying that right?
Quesenberry.
Gary's going to come on. He's going to talk about his time in the Army, his time as a Homeland Security agent, some of the opportunities he had to be on Top Shot, took his skills of shooting.
Yeah, time as an entrepreneur. Just his whole story is about him being an opportunist and seizing on those opportunities to see what life holds in store for him.
Yeah, so he's got some big things on the horizon. He came here to talk about that. So we're excited about the conversation. Stay tuned.
Let's do it. My wives are never going to listen to this.
Cracked him with strawberry milk.
How do I smoke this stuff?
Good luck to me.
Let the boy watch.
Cue the uncomfortable laughter.
No one listening.
This show's doomed to die, too.
It's like every 80s rock video.
People laugh. Gets the juices flowing. It's going to go great. Thank you.
We have zero listeners.
Yeah, entrepreneurs.
All right, so Gary, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, no problem. It's good to be here.
All right, today we are here with Gary Quesenberry. We want to sit down and talk to you about this crazy adventure that you've been on throughout your law enforcement career and how that's kind of turned into a whole bunch of other things. So with that, let's get it started.
Yeah. All right, so Gary, you are getting ready to retire this year, at the end of this year, 28 years in the government. Is that right?
Yeah. I left home when I was 17 years old and joined the Army. And here I am, October of 2020, I retired with 28 years. So it's been a long road, but when you look back on it, hindsight being 2020, it's kind of like, where did all that go? You know what I mean? So, but it's exciting, new chapter in my life. So ready for it.
And 17, you enlisted in the Army, right?
Yep.
And
yeah, I was 13 Bravo, Field Artillery.
And this was this would have been what, 28 years ago. You came in early 90s?
88. I joined up in 88, right after I graduated high school.
And did they send you right over were you in the first Desert Shield?
I was, yeah, but it was a couple years into it. Like when I went into the military, there was a thing called a cohort, which I love the concept. Like the guys that I went through basic training with in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, we stayed together the entire time we were in, until Desert Storm kicked off, and then they kind of split us up. So I went over there, a few people went to other units, and we got broke up. But I was over there in 91, and then once I came back from Desert Storm, that was kind of the end of my enlistment. So I just I got out and decided I was going to try some other stuff.
I'm sorry, what year was that? What?
91.
So you get out 91. And is that when you ended up getting into federal law enforcement, or what was your path after that?
No, actually, I had a few years there where I was just trying to, I don't know. Yeah, you're just blowing off steam. You're young, you know what I'm saying? You're in your 20s. You're trying to find what you want to do. But, I ended up working. God, I did so many different things. I drove a forklift. I worked in a cabinet shop. I did a lot of woodworking stuff.
Great, yeah.
I always enjoyed that. So I ended up getting married, having a couple of kids. And then, once my oldest was born, my son, me and my wife were looking at each other like, all right, I should probably get a real job. Like I should try to do something that, with an end goal in mind, you know what I mean? Like some kind of retirement where I can draw in a little bit of money and actually support this family that we're building, because, building kitchen cabinets wasn't really cutting it at the time.
I think everybody should have that post, and everybody probably does have, except for a very small few. Everybody's got that post-military job where they did. I was a wedding DJ for a hot minute.
Dude, I was homeless. I was no joke.
That's not really a job. I mean, it's something.
It pays like crap. The benefits suck. I was crashing on guys. I was crashing on guys' couches. I was putting in security, those like big metal security gate doors in the ghettos of Sacramento. I had my tools.
Really?
Yeah, no shit. I
was in Sacramento.
Were you? Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, that's where my wife's from.
Oh, okay.
A little town south of Sacramento called Elk Grove.
Oh, I know Elk Grove.
Did you ever drive by and give a sandwich to the homeless vet that was on the street?
that was you.
I think you stole my DeWalt drill, you son of a bitch.
The one that you stole, we're trying to sell at the flea market?
That's right. It's the one I stole off a crackhead.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I have another buddy who got out of the SEAL teams, and he thought he was destined to be go on to do great things immediately. And it was a hot minute. He couldn't find a job. He ended up working in the baggage in the bowels of I think Chicago O'Hare Airport, and he's throwing bags with these other guys who are like on work release, and they're like, "Yo, man, what do you think you might like rise to supervisor one day?" And he's like, "At that moment, I realized like I just." I have failed to achieve my goals.
But that's what happens when you get out. Like all of a sudden, just time goes by, and next thing you know, you're driving a forklift, and you're like, I don't even know how this happened.
Yeah.
Like for me, I mean, I wish I
was actually my side hustle when I was driving a forklift was I could pick a dime up. I could lay a dime on the ground. And pick a dime up with the forks of a forklift. There's a trick to it. But once I learned how to do it, I was hustling dudes for money. And so I'm like betting guys in the warehouse that I could pick a dime up and then taking their money, and I would use that to buy Carl's Jr. So I could feed my wife.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's funny because we all do that. You know what I mean? You get out of the military, no matter what branch of service you were in or what you did. Everybody's all full of piss and vinegar and everything, but you realize that planning is actually a big part of life. Like you actually have to have some sort of an end goal in mind. You can't just get out and be like, here I am, world.
Right.
Take me as I am. And it's not. That's no way to live.
You get out and you think you've got it all figured out.
Oh, right.
I'd been offered a job with the Department of Energy, and it was doing some of the same stuff I did in the military. And I said, I don't want to do that. I did that in the military. I don't want to do it. Next thing I know, it was framing houses or tiling or doing some of those miserable. Sorry, tilers and framers, but your job stinks. But yes, that's it. And planning is, I guess, really what it's about. That way you don't end up on
exactly. Yeah. And when you're young, we used to sit around all the time in these observation posts and these little holes in the dirt, by our guns and stuff, field artillery, talking about how awesome it was going to be when we got out and what we were going to do, and we're going to get together every year in Aruba and have these big parties like reunions. It never happens. You know what I mean? You get out and you're like, shit, I need some money in my pocket. I got to get a job, and then you start doing these like menial tasks and then you start realizing that okay, all right, this takes a little bit of preparation. It's not something that I was exactly ready for when I got out, but as long as you're resilient and you learn quick, you figure it out pretty fast that this is going to have to go somewhere else.
All the arrogant 22-year-olds sitting in that TAPS class, that class you take just before you get out, and they're like, you need to put your resume together. You're like, fuck this. You're like, I got this, man. I'm ready. Ready. I got vacations in Aruba planned. I don't need this assistance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, see, when I got out in '91, we didn't have those classes. Like they gave us a piece of paper, and literally, like your MOS, there was a piece of paper that said, okay, these are the jobs that you're qualified for. I was in field artillery. There's not a lot of room for shooting giant cannons in the civilian world. You know what I'm saying? So
circus.
Shooting this little guy out of a cannon.
Super Dave's
But
hired.
no, there was one job. And it was, I guess they hire people at these big ski resorts and stuff.
Oh yeah,
to shoot one of those cannons into the side of a mountain to
create an avalanche.
To start the avalanches and stuff. So that the snow gets settled and there's not a chance for an avalanche further into the season. So. And they're like, all ski resorts have that one guy.
So,
that does that, so.
And he gets employed 1 to 2 days a year.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. 1 to 2 days a year, and he does that until he dies.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of jobs.
And there's 5,000 of you looking to score that job. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So I'm like, well, I'm never going to do that.
Picking up dimes with the forklift was not on that paper, I imagine.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. That's something I had to come up with myself.
Oh, yeah.
See?
When I left the SEAL teams in 2001, I was like, oh man, James Bond jobs are gonna be open for me. And then 6 months later, I remember, like, no kidding, that was my awakening. I was like, all right, who wants to do the chicken dance? And but you know what? It builds character, and it's a lesson in humility that we all, like, so many vets share, and it's those great stories, right, that you share. Like,
so there's not one part of my life, even that little dead space between the military and law enforcement work that I don't look back on and say, I took something from that. I learned a lesson from it. It made me a little bit stronger, made me a little bit more resilient. There's something, if you're not taking something away from everything you do, then you're not doing it right. So
yeah, I took away, I don't want to live on a guy's couch anymore. So
I'm if I get nothing else out of this podcast, I'm going to Google, I'm going to go on YouTube and see this lifting a dime with a forklift trick. This is
That's it. Yeah.
Now
yeah.
you're gonna have a new level.
Get near a forklift together, I'll take $5 from you.
All right. So from there, what you decided that you wanted to move on to something, I don't know, with bigger, maybe with a pension.
Yeah. Well, like I said, my wife's from Sacramento, and that's where I was working in a cabinet shop out there, driving a forklift and running a cutoff saw. We decided that we wanted to raise our kid somewhere that was, like back home. I'm from the southern part of Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains, right on the border of North Carolina. And, we figured that'd be a good place to raise a kid. So we loaded everything we had, up in a U-Haul and went back to Virginia. And, I was there for a little while doing exactly the same thing, working in a furniture factory, except for now, instead of kitchen cabinets, it's bedroom furniture that I'm building, headboards and footboards and end tables and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm moving up, right? See, it's slow, but it's sure. So anyway, a buddy of mine that I went to junior high school with, he lived up in West Virginia, and he said, "Hey man, I don't know if you know, but they're opening up a federal prison up here. And, it's a law enforcement work. It's got a good retirement."
Like, listen, man, I'm trying to stay clean.
Yeah, right.
I don't need it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it, because when I first got back home after after I got out of the military, there was a little bit of a wild streak in me, So it was like 3.5, 4 years. I started the Bureau of Prisons in '95, as a GS5 correctional officer in Beckley, West Virginia. And, when I left home, people would be like, "Well, where's Gary?" And my dad's like, "Oh, he's at the prison up in West Virginia." And they're like, "Well,
figures."
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah.
He's like, "No, he's working there. He's got a job."
Like I just
they all have jobs inside the joint.
So, it was a lot of fun, but the prison work was tough work, but it was rewarding work. And I did that for 6 years, and then went over to DHS shortly after 9/11.
Ah, okay.
All right, so you're up there. You go over to DHS opportunities, right? DHS after 9/11, the whole agency gets started in what I think it was late 02, early 03, right?
Yeah. I came in May or March of 02.
Right. Oh, wow.
And then you've been with them ever since, right? Is that
ever since? Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit. I've done several jobs within the DHS, but I've always stuck with them. So it's been a good job.
So for some of our listeners, they may not know, but Josh and I have spent time in federal law enforcement. And Gary, you were one of my instructors at the academy, at the DHS Academy. And for those guys who don't know, so I'm coming in as this. I'm not totally wet behind the ears, but I'm younger and not experienced in federal law enforcement, and I'm coming fresh out of the SEAL teams. And I say to and I start joking around with Gary a little bit, and I know he's a good shot, right? I know Gary he's good with a gun on the range, and at some point. I don't remember. You may remember how it happened, but at some point I had challenged you to. I hadn't yet earned my badge, right?
Yeah.
I
remember exactly how this happened, because I tell this story all the time. Anybody that'll listen.
You go ahead and tell the story.
So, all right. So we had 23 firearm sessions on the range, right? And it progresses from the basics to the more advanced stuff, and the 23rd session is like right before graduation. And, at the time, I've always told people, like, if I don't remember you from the academy, it's probably a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, if I remember you, it's probably because you were screwing up. At the time, I was the lead firearms instructor, and we had 3 classes going through at a time. So we were humping, like we were really busy. Well, the last session 23, was what I called the call out day. So if you had an instructor that you thought maybe couldn't practice what they preached, you were allowed to call out your instructor and shoot against your instructor. And I was not an instructor. I was the lead. So, my job was to watch the other instructors and make sure that everybody was staying on the same sheet of music with the curriculum and all the safety requirements and stuff were being met. But John, decided that he wanted to call. He didn't want to just go for an instructor. He wanted to go for me. He wanted to come for the lead. So, and now at the time, I didn't know at the time, because I wasn't really paying that close attention. But I didn't know John was coming out of the SEAL teams. And, we wear these little tan, like shooting vests, right? And I noticed that John had his trident on his vest, right? So, and nobody had seen him wearing this. So anyway, he calls me out. And I was like, all right, listen, I usually don't do this. I said, but for you, sure, I'll come out there and shoot with you. I said, but if I outshoot you, And I knew what it was. I knew it was a SEAL team Trident, but I was just pushing John's button. So I told him, I'm like, if I win, I get to take your little button.
Yeah, and you wouldn't even call it a Trident. You just call it the little button.
Yeah,
your little
I
pledge
just called
pin.
it his little button. Yeah. So he's like, it's a SEAL team Trident. You know, I'm like, oh, whatever. You know, I'll take that from you. So he's like, well, what do I get? And you know, I don't know if you've heard of the triple nickel. We were all pretty proud of that, like belonging to that triple nickel. Like if you complete this course of fire 3 times, you get a coin and everything. So I had the triple nickel coin. I was the 5th person to accomplish that, and I was pretty proud of that coin. So John said, "Well, if I beat you, I get your triple nickel coin." So I'm like, "All right, my triple nickel coin for your little button." And we go out, and I forget what we shot. I think we just shot the old TPC, the tactical pistol course. Yeah. And not taking anything away from John. John's a fantastic shot. I think
that's okay. We don't need to try and that. Now you're just being gratuitous.
There's a maximum score of 150.
You're being patronizing.
I shot
now.
a 150, and John shot a 149. So I beat him, and I took his little button, and I told him, I'm like, hey, listen, man. I said, you know, I didn't earn this. This isn't mine. I'm like, I still have your little button in a drawer in my house. And I told John, I'm like, you practice, and when you decide you want to come and take that button back, it's all yours. But he's never come back for it. So I don't know what's going on.
The fact you refuse to call it a Trident and you continue to call this little button is the best.
His little button.
Yeah, it's the best thing.
And he has I mean, that was 12 years 12 years ago. Yeah, you continue to say, hey.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how long ago that was.
Let me say that I brought that thing in that day because you and I we'd had a conversation before something about it, and I brought it in that day because we had talked about like, what are you going to bet? So I brought it in that day, and I put it on my shooting vest just as some sort of obnoxious, like, it's in your face kind of sign. Knowing full well that I was going to lose it that way. I think I'd gone to the exchange, the Navy exchange the weekend before just to buy an extra one, knowing full well I was going to lose. I was going to lose it.
Full of them.
Yeah, and Gary's being kind. I'm not. I don't think I got a 149. I don't know if I did. You graded me on a curve, but knowing full well. But I've laughed ever since because even my wife remembers it. She's like, I was like, hey, we're going to interview Gary Quesenberry. She's like, why do I know them? I was like, remember the guy who shot my Trident? She's like, oh yeah, he called it your button or your pin or something. Yeah, that's the guy.
That's great.
Yeah, good times.
So that's actually a good segue because you obviously are a tremendous shooter, right? You've always been a good shooter. You grow up. I'm going to totally stereotype you. You grew up back in southwestern Virginia. Grew up shooting, right? So what a lot of people know you from then is you're obviously kind of, you have a quasi-celebrityism at SHOT Show and in the shooting world, but a lot of that came from your time on Top Shot and then subsequently on Top Shot All-Stars. So kind of take us through. So you're an agent with DHS and season 1 of Top Shot had already, you were on season 2, is that correct?
No, I was on season 3 and then the All-Star season. And the way I didn't even know about this really. And when it started coming out, I got a message from a good friend of ours. You guys know him, JJ Ricazza. And, JJ and I knew each other. And, he told me, he said, hey, man, the show's coming out. I'm going to be on the first season. It's a shooting competition, but it's not all about guns. I mean, it's all marksmanship. So everything from archery to guns to throwing knives. On season 3, at one point, we actually threw rocks. It's just, it's anything to do with marksmanship and accuracy. So he's like, hey, man, you ought to look into this. He said, because
you'd be good in
it's
Iran.
A lot of fun. And I think you would. What's that?
You'd be good in Iran. Don't they still do public stonings?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So.
Throwing rocks.
Too soon?
So,
might be too soon.
Yeah, it's bad time.
Yeah, nah, it's fine. It's fine. But he told me, he's like, you should look into this. At the time, I just got to my new duty station, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do that. Like, I'll watch you and everything. So season 2 rolls around. He's like, hey man, you should really put in. I'm like, nah, I'm getting ready to move and this and that. I got a lot going on. Season 3 rolls around, and I was in a position where I'm like, yeah, I think I'll do this. And I put in for season 3. I forget how many thousands of people they said applied for it, but they ended up taking 100 of us out to LA, and it's like a 4-day deal. You do a psychological test, a drug test. They take you out to the range, make sure you can actually shoot, and they put you in front of a camera to make sure that you don't freeze up and you've actually got some sort of a personality that they're looking for. And then they pick 16 people. to go on this, it's a reality competition type show. But it was a lot of fun, and it really kind of changed my life. I had a lot of fun doing it, and but it gave me the name exposure that I needed later down the road. You know what I mean? For things that I didn't even realize at the time that I was going to be getting into. But it opened up a lot of doors for me, and it was a lot of fun. And, I always enjoy that kind of stuff. I grew up shooting, like you said, John. You're not stereotyping me. That's just the way it is. But to this day, I've got 3 brothers. There's 4 of us. I'm the oldest of 4. And like I go home on vacation or whatever and say we all get together for Thanksgiving, that day doesn't end without us having some sort of a shooting competition, whether it's, somebody got a new bow and we end up in the backyard. And, but it's just, it's always been that way.
So there's shooting in the backwoods, right, with your brothers. And then there's top shot shooting or
throwing rocks, throwing ninja stars.
Yeah, that's right. But that's another level. I know you came from the military. Was that something you learned? Were you shooting competitive? Were you doing competitions? Like, how did you get to the point where you're taking guys' little buttons on the range? I mean, where did that come from? Was that just repetition? Is that you just shooting a bunch, or did you have somebody teaching you? Like, how'd that go?
I was never a big competitive shooter. Like, I grew up shooting. I've always enjoyed it. I love the mechanics that go into it. And I love the competition. I'm a competitive guy. Mm-hmm. And once I got into DHS, I was a decent shot within the field office. But you see some of these guys that have been shooting competitively for years, and it gave me something to work towards. So I always tried to brush up on those skills. By the time I got to Atlantic City and worked at the academy, now I'm on the range all day long. We would start at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm there till, sometimes 7 o'clock at night for the after hours remediations and stuff. And between, shooting with the student, and you talk about this stuff enough. Yeah. Like, the fundamentals of marksmanship, the stance, the grip, sight alignment, trigger management, all this different stuff. And it starts to stick. It just becomes so ingrained in you that it's all you get behind a gun and it's all you're doing. And it made me a much better shooter. So by the time I got to Top Shot, I was at the competitive level, without really being a competitive shooter, in any formal sense. So.
You had to be one of the only guys here that didn't come from some type of competitive shooting world, correct? I mean, I could be wrong on that, but it just seems to me that. Yeah,
well, I mean, they tried to mix it up on Top Shot. Like, they had people from all different backgrounds. And when I was on season 3, every season they tried to do something a little bit different. So on season 3, what they did was they took 2 people from each field. So you had 2 competitive shooters, you had 2 archery champions, you had 2 police officers, you had 2, DHS agents, all these different backgrounds, and they paired us up. They put us on 2 separate teams. So now you're kind of pitted against your mirror image, basically. Right. And it was me and a really good friend of mine, Jared Grimes, who were both DHS agents at the time. We'd worked together for years. You guys both know Jared. And, we'd both worked together for years. And this was kind of like the best case scenario for the 2 of us, because we were very competitive with each other. And like when we would have some sort of a disagreement on the range, we would always, we'd go out and shoot and say, we're going to do the triple nickel. Whoever gets the best, the most out of 10 cold, they get to make the decision, right? So, we settled a lot of arguments. We settled a lot of arguments out on the range,
If you go back for a second, you said you applied, one of whatever 4,000 people applied. What was the application? Did you have to send in like a video of you like on the range or throwing stars or?
Yeah. Everybody submits an application video. So, mine was, and some of these things, man, the production value on them, it looks like it was shot by, Lucasfilms or something. And mine wasn't that. My wife just filmed it on a little handheld camcorder that we had for me. And, you talk about, your experience with shooting. You talk about, kind of how you grew up, and then you kind of highlight some of your talents. And mine wasn't necessarily with a gun, because it's marksmanship centric. It's not necessarily what you can do with a pistol or a rifle. And there was one video clip, and when it was all said and done, the producer said that this is what got us. Like, this is what made us really want you on the show. Is my daughter was babysitting for some neighbors across the street. And at the time, we lived in Cleveland. So, it's the snow knee deep 6 months out of the year. And my daughter was walking across the yard. And she was all the way across into the neighbor's driveway, and I made a big snowball and chucked it at her and hit her right in the back of the head. She gets mad and comes running back across the street at me, and my wife's filming me running from my daughter, while she was going to babysit. But they're like, yeah, that's perfect. It kind of highlighted the, I don't know, like the personality types they were looking for. And they try to get different personality types, because at the end of the day, it is a reality show. And they kind of want personalities that work together and some that pull against each other, so that they create that little bit of tension, get that little bit of drama, in the house and stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's a reality show.
And the dad who would be willing to like bean his daughter with a snowball, you were typecast as the villain then?
Yeah, the heel.
No.
The heel.
Actually, you know how the editing process works. Like it's they can make you look pretty much. You give them enough material, because you're in that house 24 hours a day. You didn't have cell phones. They didn't allow you to have books. They just want you interacting with each other. So you have good days, you have bad days, and at the end of it, they could take whatever they wanted out of those 24-hour periods and make you look pretty much however they wanted. But I think they tried to, highlight your personality for what it was. There was maybe one or two people that I thought came off as something different than they were inside the house. But
so that had to be strange coming from a job in the DHS that anyone who will get to your book later, but they'll have to read your book to figure out exactly what that is. But it's a job where you're not really in the public eye. They kind of pride themselves on being, the quiet professional. So to go from that and those skills that you learned in that job to going to LA or and being on camera 24/7, that's got to be a pretty strange dynamic.
Yeah, true antithesis of everything you had done up to that point, right?
Yeah, it was really different. And you can shoot in front of people, like you can be competitive and shoot in front of students and shoot competitively or whatever, but it's an entirely different ball game when you're sitting there and you've got all these cameras on you, and you'll be in the middle of something and an airplane will come over and they're like, all right, hold for sound, and you got to stop and then start again, because you guys know as well as I do, you both came from the military, and you've got this competitive streak in you, but you get this mindset going, you get it in your head, all right, this is what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to do it to 100% of my ability, and you got to stop because the lighting is wrong or because there's a sound issue, and then you got to get yourself back into that mind frame. But no, it was the exact opposite of, like you said, that quiet professional thing, because now you're sitting in front of these cameras and, they expect you to talk about your life and what you're doing. Now that I'm towards the end of my career, you mentioned, the book that I'd written, and we'll talk, about that a little bit later, I guess. But, I'm opening up about it a little bit more. So
sure. A lot of knowledge to share. Right? 28 years in the government, there's a lot of stuff that be shared that people can use and employ in their own lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. I mean, you work in a job where you're kind of paid to protect people and keep everything safe. And even when you retire, if there's something you can do to kind of pass that information along, to the people that are coming up or the people that don't necessarily work in law enforcement or in the military, but this information that they could use to keep themselves safe, you want to share that. So.
Can you, just before we get away from Top Shot, I want to talk. So you finished Top Shot. Couple of years later, great, and there's a little bit like people recognize you, and especially people who are in that, who follow Top Shot, and it really is a fun show. I think it's available on History Channel or on YouTube. I think there's some clips out there.
Yeah, it's on Amazon or Netflix or something now.
Right, and it really is, as Gary said, for anybody who's listening who has not watched it, it really is a fun show to watch because they get in. It's more than just shooting. It really gets into dynamics and how people, the elements of shooting, that it's more than just, holding a gun at your hip and spraying and praying like in the movies. Right. It really, there's some technique and some real skill and everything from breathing and concentration and focus. And it's a hell of a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But the thing is like, I come in there from the background that I come from. And, the things that you just talked about, the breathing and the grip and sight alignment and trigger control, all that shit goes out the window when they strap you to a 30-foot Ferris wheel. And they're like, all right, you're going to spin around at 15 miles an hour, and shoot at these exploding targets with an MP5.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And they're like, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to look awesome on TV. And it did, but there's no skill involved in that whatsoever. And I don't care who you're talking to from the show that says, oh, yeah, I had a plan and this is what I did. No, you're pulling the trigger. And when shit starts blowing up, you just hope that you have the right rhythm, for that one lap around on the Ferris wheel. But, they try to do all this like elaborate stuff to make it more exciting, like it's shooting. And it's competition, but there's these elements thrown in that were just like at one point, I've always been a big archery fan. And one of the competitions was they've got you're shooting a recurve bow, just a standard recurve bow, nothing fancy. And there's these spinning targets, right? They're moving targets. So we're like, all right, this is going to be difficult. So when we practice, because you get so much practice for the competition, but they always throw in a little twist. So when you get to the competition, it's a little bit different than what you saw at practice, right? So we're shooting at these moving targets,
like marriage
in practice. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They entice you with a little bit. They show you, and then you put the ring on, and things are a little bit just a little bit different.
Extra in at the end to make it more difficult, right? It's exactly like that. So we get to the competition, and not only are we shooting at moving targets, but there's a ramp in front of the targets, and you have to shoot the arrows at the ramp and skip the arrows up into the moving targets. Now, who does that? Who does that? Like it's not something that's typical, but it makes for good TV, and it puts and the thing is you could be an archery champion, but this kind of puts everything at a level playing field. Now everybody's on the same, at the same level. But every time we show up and we see these crazy elaborate things, skipping arrows and the Ferris wheel is spinning you around at 15 miles an hour, we're like, all right, this is going to be different.
Yeah, right. Makes for good television.
Yeah, that's where it makes, it's not as much about what you can do as far as shooting. When they start adding ramps or any of that stuff.
So they called you then to come back. It was a couple of years that went by before the Top Shot All Stars before you went back on. And did you reapply to that, or did they call you up? Or
no, they wanted people. They didn't want the people that won it necessarily. They wanted the people I think that maybe resonated with audiences,
some fan favorites,
and finished at least in the top 5. I think from their season. Out of 16 people, you finish in the top 5 or the top 4. You've made it pretty much to the last episode. So they wanted people that was kind of in that group that were looking for, it was like a redemption type thing. Like I was so close, right, but so far away. So I'm coming back to give it another shot. And in season 3, I finished, I made it to the final episode. I finished 3rd place, out of 16 shooters. And then I go to the All-Star season. I think I got it nailed. I finished 3rd place again. So I wasn't taking nobody's little buttons on Top Shot.
We'll edit that part out.
So from Top Shot, that things kind of snowballed from there as far as opportunities for you. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the things you've been able to do since that?
Well, it was really weird, I've always been an active guy. Like I try to stay busy. I try to keep a project going all the time. Aside from just your 9-to-5 job, and a lot of doors opened up once I finished with Top Shot, because now all of a sudden I'm going to things like SHOT Show out in Las Vegas. And people are like, oh my God, it's Gary Quesenberry, and they're wanting to take pictures. I go to my hometown and, they want me to do these like speaking engagements and these autograph signings and have these viewing parties, where people get together and watch Top Shot. And this is in my hometown. And people are coming up to me and they're like, hey man, let me get your autograph. And I'm like, you wouldn't sign my yearbook.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you want me to, and it was just so weird. It was really surreal, but it did
you used
open
to
up a
dunk
lot
my
of
head in the
doors.
toilet in fifth grade.
What do you? Yeah. Used to beat me up and shove me in a locker. Now all of a sudden you want me to sign your T-shirt. What's going on here?
And that was last year.
Yeah, but no, it opened up a lot of doors, and if you're, if you think about things really, and you have any sort of ability to a little foresight, let's say, so that you can plan ahead. Once I saw this name recognition thing and I realized, okay, people know who I am now, and I could kind of spin this in my, use it to my benefit. And a lot of this is just dumb luck. Like a lot of where I'm at right now is really, it just kind of happened, and I can't explain why it happened, but it just all kind of worked together. But so I was working in Ohio on a gun range, and the guy that owned it is this beautiful property out in the middle of Ohio. And he was a really good dude, and we used to go out there and shoot together all the time. And I was out there one day shooting, and I had made a holster, right? Because, I carry a gun sometimes 14 hours a day, in all these different environments, and you start to realize what works and what doesn't. So one day I'm in my garage, and I start taking all these holsters that I had in a box and ripping pieces apart and melting plastic and screwing stuff together. And I made a little minimalist concealment holster that was mine, and I felt like this is just, this is going to work great, because the less material you use in a holster, the more comfortable it is over an extended period of time. That's what I've always found. So anyway, I'm wearing this Frankenstein holster, out on the range, and That's what I should have named it actually. but I'm wearing this thing out on the range, and my buddy that owned it saw me drawing from it. He's like, what kind of holster are you using? And I took it off and I showed him. Well, his girlfriend was there, and she was almost never on the range when I was out there shooting, but she's not necessarily a gun person. She's a management person. Her name's Cheryl, one of the best people I've ever met in my life. And she's got a business brain. So I'm showing my holster to my buddy Dale, and she sees it and she's like, can I take a look at that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I take it off and show it to her. And she's like, you could totally make these, like mass produce them, turn this into a business. And, I'm like, at the time, I'm like, and she goes, you being on Top Shot and everybody knowing who you are, like you could use that to market these. And I'm not a business guy. I wasn't at the time. I am now, but I kind of got thrown into the deep end, really quick and had to learn how to swim. But
so let me stop you for 1 sec, because you said you're making holsters, and I've seen it on an interview or something somewhere. Where you previously mentioned you said you made that first holster. You said you were melting plastic. You were using like a household appliance, or you were using like a microwave or a toaster or something.
Well, when we first started like making them, like mass producing these things, I'll say mass producing, but I just had the one holster, and I melted it in the oven at home. This sheet of plastic. And my wife comes home and she's like, what in the hell are you doing? Like, why does the house stink? I'm melting plastic, babe. Just relax. I've got this. Yeah. But
the next great invention.
Just make sure the fire extinguisher is here somewhere close. So anyway, my friend Cheryl sees this thing and she's talking about it. And later on that night, I'm sitting at home. I never gave it a second thought. And my phone rang, and it was Cheryl. And she said, hey, I didn't mean to be pushy or anything, with this whole holster business. She goes, but if this is something you would be interested in, she goes, I've got a friend who's an engineer, and we can take a look at it, and I'll front you the seed money you need to get this thing started. You make me a partner, and we can turn this into a business. So we got with the engineer, and we came up with a design that looked a little more polished than what I made at home in the oven.
The oven-made plastic?
Yeah. So we made 5 or 10 of these things, and it just so happened that it lined up with SHOT Show. So I go out to Las Vegas, for people that don't know, SHOT Show is huge in the gun industry. It's a week in Las Vegas where, the Sands Convention Center just gets filled up with all these gun nuts. Right. And, it's
advocates.
It's
gun,
great
gun
time.
advocates.
Gun advocates. Yeah, that's it. So, it's all law enforcement and military, and all the new products and stuff are coming out. And because I had the name recognition from Top Shot, people are like seeking me out now. It's not like I'm just walking around, trying to meet people. People are coming up to me, and the people that I thought, like distributors in the gun industry, retailers that have big like retail stores and stuff in the gun industry, I'm giving them these holsters that I made. I made like 10 or 15 holsters. And when we made those, we actually made them out of a little toaster. We got a little more sophisticated. Now we have a toaster oven. 2 toaster ovens actually that we bought at Walmart, right? And we cut the backs out of them, and we made these little metal jigs, to put the plastic in, to put in. And my friend Cheryl, she said at one point, she's like, I can tell. She goes, it's like brownies. I can tell when the plastic's ready to mold by the way it smells. Like I know when it's done, right? So yeah, so we made these 15 holsters, and Cheryl, she's back in Ohio. And I gave them to some guys that I'd gone to their Neve's uniforms out of Denver, Colorado. Great guys. They had me come out to their store for an autograph signing. And I ran into them at SHOT Show. And I said, hey, take a look at these holsters that I'm making. And they're like, oh, these are awesome. Do you have packaging for them? And I'm like, yeah, this is what it's going to look like. Like we had one concept, like a mock-up of the packaging. And they're like, these will look great on shelves. They said, can we order some? I'm like, yeah, how many do you need? I'm thinking 10 or 15 holsters. They're like, we'll take 200 holsters. So I'm like,
we need more toaster ovens. Back to Walmart we go.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like I didn't want to give it away. Like I'm not at that level yet, but I was going to fake it till I make it.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So I'm
right.
like, yeah, I could totally do 200 holsters. So now I'm panicked, and I get on the phone with Cheryl. I'm like, Cheryl, we're going to need a bigger toaster.
Right.
So that was the first store that actually carried the holsters, and the holsters are Q series, Q series holsters, little minimalist inside the waistband holsters. But since then, things have really exploded. They've grown to the point where, they're being mass produced. It's all injection molding. They're very polished. They're very finished. Everything's very professional now. And I'm a little more hands off than I used to be, but now we're in stores all over the world, actually.
Wow.
Like they're being carried in Israel and Austria and Australia and different places by law enforcement and military. So It's gone really good. And it all happened because I just happened to be standing on the range one day showing something that I made to a friend who somebody else saw it, and it just lined up with that name recognition thing from Top Shot. And, that plus my experience in the industry with the DHS and everything gave me a little bit of credibility in the field. And, now it's really taking off.
Yeah. I know you're saying that things just kind of fell into place or you got lucky, but there's something to be said about an opportunity arising in front of you and then grasping it. So it's no mistake that you just ended up on Top Shot, and did well and all those things that led up to you on that show, an opportunity for something like a holster. You take that brand, you make that grow. So you may not have been thought of yourself as a business guy, but it sure seems to be going in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of downplay things sometimes, so I talk about how, it's all accident. You just fall into it. But nobody showed up in a van and was like, get in, we're going to Top Shot,
Exactly.
And so, there's a little bit of work that went into it. And, I think the timing piece of it was very fortunate, and it worked out in my favor. All the pieces were there. I think what people need to focus on is the fact that everybody has that. Like everybody has these opportunities that are put in front of them. It's up to you to recognize it and have a little bit of foresight so that you can say, okay, here's this thing that's been handed to me, basically. And no matter how big or small that may be, what can I do to capitalize on it and turn that into the next thing that could benefit me and my family? Because ever since my days driving a forklift, I've got a wife at home now. I've got a young son, and I realize that there has to be something beyond this. Like I can't be hustling dudes, for $5 to $10 at a pop, picking up dimes with a forklift, and support a family that way. So, you get these little opportunities in life, and no matter where they come from or what direction you find them, if you're wise enough to see it, grasp it for what it is, and then turn that into the next thing, then you're always going to be successful.
And even if you don't know that end state, right? You don't know where it's going to lead. You just know it's an opportunity.
Right. You just know it's an opportunity, and you know that, I'm not afraid.
Right.
I'm an adventurous guy, and that comes from, growing up where I grew up and being in the military and things like that. And I'm not afraid to take steps into the unknown. And I think that's a big part. A lot of people get in this little safe space, in this little bubble where they feel comfortable and they want to stay there. But if you ever want to, go beyond, and do things that you didn't really necessarily see yourself doing 3, 5, 10 years ago, you've got to take that next step.
That's it, man. It's season it, because a lot of people, they'll be in the position you're in as far as just your normal 9-to-5 job and say, hey, I'm here. I did it. I did everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But to be, to continue to grow, to seize opportunities when they come up, I think that's what we're trying to do here. So we definitely, that story resonates with us.
Well, before we close out, I want to talk, because you're talking about opportunities and, all of these opportunities you continue to seize along the way. We kind of alluded to, you have a new book coming out in May, right? You have 28 years in the government, 25 in federal law enforcement. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and sort of the genesis for it and what the theme of it?
Yeah. The book thing is another one of those, those kind of, unforeseen opportunities like we just talked about. Because of my name recognition from the Top Shot thing and my experience in law enforcement, I started doing a little bit of teaching on the side. And there's a group of instructors in Kentucky that I used to go out and teach for about once a year. They'd have me put a course together. And they started talking about doing a course that wasn't necessarily, that didn't necessarily revolve around firearms, right? They wanted to do something for people that maybe they're not comfortable carrying a gun, but how can they, ensure their own personal safety? So I started thinking about this, and, it all boils down to me, and, to a lot of people, is situational awareness. You can, I don't care whether you're carrying a gun or if you're a knife guy or a jiu-jitsu guy or whatever. You can't fight what you don't see coming. You're not going to be able to do it. So situational awareness is a huge part in personal defense. You need to be able to spot the things that are going on around you, be able to interpret, the information that you're taking in, and come up with some sort of a plan to avoid danger if at all possible. So I get to thinking about this, and I'm putting together a lesson plan for this group of instructors. And the more I plug into it, the more I start looking at it and saying, well, this looks like a table of contents. So then I start, just in my spare time, I would sit down and I would take one bullet point in that little table of contents in that outline, and I'd try to write, 500, 1,000 words about that topic. And then once I started getting it all put together, John saw one of the very first drafts of it. Actually, it's a much different animal than it was when we first started out on it, but it turned into like 45,000 words of, on my experiences and thoughts on situational awareness and how you can use that to ensure your personal safety. So now I've got this manuscript and I don't know what to do with it. So I'm doing all this research, about how to get a book published. And I'm looking at the self-publishing route, and I'm looking at trying to get an agent, and I'm getting all these rejection letters and stuff, because, at the end of the day, not everything is easy, right? Like, not everything's just going to be handed to you. So you got to do a lot of work for it. So I sent my first manuscript to a publishing company, YMAA Publications. They do a lot of self-defense books, and you don't have to have an agent with them. You can just submit to them directly. So I submit to them, and I actually got a response back, and it was not what I was expecting. The words "unfit to publish" was actually in the feedback, and it was it's like a punch in the face. But I've been punched in the face before. So, you take a step back, you recalibrate. And the good thing about what I love about YMAA Publications is that it wasn't just them tearing down my manuscript. They were giving me feedback on it. Like, this is something that there's little nuggets in there that you need to focus on. There's things that people could take away from this that would really benefit them, but this is what you need to do. This is what you need to focus on. So their thing was, because it was kind of spread out, it was more about mindset and situational awareness and physical preparation and, all these different things. They're like, doing what you do for the Department of Homeland Security, it seems like your superpower, so to speak, would be situational awareness, right? Like you guys that do the job you do this piece better than anybody else. So just write about that. So I ended up, completely tearing my manuscript down, rebuilding it. It took me about another 4 months to get another more polished manuscript together, resubmitted to YMAA Publications, and they're like, yeah, we want to pick this up.
Cool.
And the name of the book is?
They picked it. The book is called, the title has gone through several different iterations, but now it is Spotting Danger Before It Spots You is the title of the book. And it's actually up on Amazon right now, ready for pre-orders and stuff. It comes out May the 1st. And, it's a book for everybody. It's not necessarily for military or law enforcement. It's for, people that just, they understand that there's a threat in the world and they want to learn how to protect themselves against that threat, not necessarily through carrying a gun or going to a gym or learning some sort of self-defense, but what can they do to spot danger, ahead of time and kind of stay away from it.
Pre-violence indicators, so you can either get out of dodge or defend yourself or whatever you got to do. So I like that.
Absolutely. And the book, the book's broken down into 3 different phases, and because in my belief, there's not one specific way to do everything. Everybody's a little bit different. But if you break it down into phases, like the first phase is, understanding the threat. How do criminals think? Who do they target? Why do they target certain people? And how to avoid those things, right? So that you don't make yourself look like an easy target for a criminal. The other one is situational awareness. And then the next one is kind of hardening your personal defenses, taking the things you know about how criminals think, the things you learned about situational awareness, and how do you put those into, into something that's going to actually help you be safer when you're walking down the street or, locking yourself up in your house at night.
Cool. And if they're interested in one of your holsters, that's the Q Series holster, correct? And where
Yeah, Q Series holster. So there's a website, qseriesllc.com. If anybody wants to go in there and take a look at the holsters, we have them for just most concealed carry type firearms. And we're trying to add 1 or 2 new products every year, but qseriesllc.com. Information about the book can be found at garyquesenberry.com. So, as some of the courses that I teach, I'm going to start doing like a public speaking circuit on situational awareness and stuff like that. People can book those, pre-order the book from Amazon. You can get it anywhere books are sold once it comes out May the 1st. But cool. It's all going well, man. And like I said, it's just you get these fortunate little nuggets in your life. And all the listeners that you guys have and stuff out there, that would be my one piece of advice to them is when you see something like that, recognize it for what it is, seize on it, and then figure out a way how you can spin that into something that benefits you and your family. So.
Awesome. Hey, Gary, thanks so much for joining us today, man. It's GaryQuesenberry.com, QSeriesLLC.com for the holsters. And the name of the book again, one more time.
It's Spotting Danger Before It Spots You.
Gary Quesenberry.
So, and it's going to be a 4-book series too.
Cool.
Yeah, they actually signed me for a 4-book series. So the first one is just about situational awareness, and then the other ones are going to be a little bit more specific, about travel, One's going to be about talking to your children about situational awareness and how to teach them, so forth, so on. So it's going to keep me busy for the next few years.
Yeah, man, good stuff. Gary, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us, and I think that's it from us.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Man. Hey, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome, Gary.
It's good talking to you guys.
Too, man.
John, you come get your little button back whenever you want to.
All right, that's it for another episode of the Kill Cliff Podcast. Our special thanks to Gary Quesenberry for coming on. Again, check him out, GaryQuesенberry.com, QSeriesLLC.com. Check him out. You can see the Top Shot Season 3 or Top Shot All-Stars. Thanks for watching.
Make sure you subscribe, like, share the Kill Cliff Podcast.